No, we did not do the one with income tax expense and income tax payable because that is only done at the end of the year once the company figures out how much money they make. Okay, right now we're just doing payroll.
Oh.
Income tax expense and income tax payable for a company is done usually once a quarter or once a year once you do the net income. Right now we're not doing anything with net income. We're doing only payroll.
I wrote income tax payable instead of FIT.
That's fine in this example because they didn't specify whether it was state, local, or federal, so that's fine. All right, so this next part, you're going to look and it's going to seem familiar to you. Because we're going to talk about notes payable. Now with notes payable, we've done, and we've calculated interest, but when we calculated interest last week, we calculated interest on what?
Interest payable.
Interest payable. What did we calculate it on? Not notes payable, but notes
Receivable.
receivable. Right. So that's when we lent someone money, right? Now we are, what's the difference? Borrowing money. All right. So on notes payable, when we pay it back, it looks like that. And we've done that all semester, correct? All right. We really haven't done any interest except for the fact that we've paid interest, but we've never calculated interest on a note. So the interest is still going to be the same. Interest equals what?
PRT.
PRT. And time is expressed over 12.
Divided by 12.
And the top never exceeds 12. All right. And when we count months, we're going to use our fingers. All right. So, yes, so we can get it right. Okay. So, the example here is the same example we did for notes receivable, except for it's notes payable. So, if we borrow $100,000 on November 1st, what's the journal entry going to look like?
Cash not payable.
All right, so we're going to have $100,000 of cash. And a credit to notes payable. Then December 31st, what do we have to do?
You have to calculate interest with the formula.
We have to calculate interest. Because it incurred, we haven't paid it, but what's the matching principle say?
Expense and revenue to recognize
When incurred, okay. Expenses have to be recognized when incurred, and we incurred them in that year. So, 12/31. My one marker's dying on me. So, how do we calculate our interest?
with the formula.
With the formula. So, let's use 6% interest. That's $100,000 times 6%. Times 2 over 12. So it would be 6,000, but 2 over 12 would make it
1,000.
1,000. He said 6. If it was a whole year, it'd be 6.
Oh.
All right, so it's $1,000. What's the journal entry?
Interest payable? No.
No.
Interest expense?
Interest expense. And
Oh, deferred interest. No. I don't need interest.
what was it? Interest payable, yes. It's not cash because we didn't pay it. We're recognizing it even though we didn't pay it. And that's what it says. Year end, we're going to record it because it's interest incurred but not paid. And that, remember, that's what it says. Interest incurred but not paid. The problems could also say things like interest incurred but not recorded. And a lot of times with these notes, you'll pay interest at the end of the year, or a lot of times when they're only 1 year, interest is paid at the end. You pay it back, you can pay all the interest. All right, so now the number 3 says, remember the book does it one way and I do it another. You can do whichever way you want, just like in notes receivable. Now it's October 31st. We're going to record the interest and pay the interest back. What do we do?
Interest payable would be debit.
Okay, interest payable for how much?
6,000 now.
Do we
Now
owe
it's
interest
5,000.
payable of 6,000? 1,000. For how much?
1,000.
Well, okay, we can do it that way.
6,000.
How much?
6,000.
6,000. And what else do you need to put in there, Kalana?
Interest expense for 5,000.
Oh, you're just taking one journal entry.
Remember, that's how your book does it. Interest payable, taking it out of here. Interest expense, because we just incurred another $5,000 in 10 months. We did 10 there, 2 there. Then we have to do another 10 the next year.
Why 10 out of 10? Not 10 out of
Because I wrote it wrong.
Okay.
Now, the other way you could do it, well, let's finish it. And then what else would you have?
The principal,
The principal. And that would be
one cash, not payable. and
notes
then cash.
payable and cash. The other way, which is I think you guys were combining things to come up with this, the other way you could do it is you could say interest expense for 5,000, interest payable for 5,000, and that is recognizing this journal entry, doing it at the 100,000 times 6 times 10 over 12. You can get that. Then, in one journal entry, do notes payable, 100,000, interest payable, 6,000, and cash, 106. I think you guys were combining that, all right? Connect is going to make you do it this way, all right? Some of you were saying combinations of this one. I don't care which one you do on a test. This is the way that I learned. The previous book did it this way because when you make a check out, are you going to do 2 checks? No, you're going to write a check for $106,000. Different authors, different ways. And then they go through, just the next couple slides, which will go fast, do exactly what we just did. So you can go back and take a look. The biggest thing that you need to remember when you're going through this is you got to get that interest calculated correctly. You got to remember when you're doing the problem, especially when you're doing your homework. Yep. Is it, and this is on the board too. It's exactly what I have on the
Oh,
board.
yeah, but I have the letters here, but not the words.
Oh, okay. You got to make sure, are you doing notes receivable or or notes payable? Sometimes on the homework, you're trying to plug in interest receivable, interest revenue, and the problem is an expense because you're doing notes.
Can you
There.
please repeat that again? What did you say?
I said you need to make sure when you're looking at the homework, are you borrowing money or are you lending money? Because these 2 chapters, the homework, one chapter you just did was when we lent money. This week we're doing when you borrow money. And then the last part, okay, that was the last part, sorry. The last chapter was paying it back. All right, last payable, and then we're going to do another problem. It's dealing with sales tax. Sales tax is when we go into a normal, everyday store, right? Target, Macy's, any place, right? Anybody know what the state sales tax is?
6%?
What is it? 7%? Only one guess? What do you think? 8?
6%.
6%?
825.
825.
Pull that out of my way.
What do you think the sales tax is?
Good answer.
Oh, what percent? It's like 9%.
It's like 9%. How can we all have, not all, how can we have 4 different guesses?
Because you know.
It's different city to county too.
Is 4.2225.
You sure about that?
That's Google.
Google.
You ask Google what Missouri's state sales tax is,
Mm-hmm.
and then what does it say if you go under that?
In
It's going to come up to 5.4.
Dang.
Okay.
5.
It is 4.225, and then there's other things at the state level added in that comes to 5.4. So how do we get to 6, 7, 8, closer to 7, 8, 9. I haven't seen a 6. But there are some 7-point things, 8-point things, and I've seen as high as 10
Yeah,
out
because
in the valley area.
yeah, because they say it vary from 4 to 10.3,
10 point what?
10.3, 350%.
Okay, 10.35. But 5.4 is what the state requires. What are all those other things?
For the companies?
Well, not necessarily the company, municipalities, the different areas. If you go out to the Gravois Bluffs, there's a Gravois Bluffs tax. Right? You go down to Costco and Target, down here in South, it's a Rusty Road tax. That's the name of the road you turn on to go to Costco. If you go, I haven't been out to the valley in a while, but look at your receipt the next time you shop and look at the bottom. It will tell you what the other taxes are. That's how those developments get built, is the additional taxes on it. And I can tell you, since I've lived in South County, the Rusty Road tax, there were other taxes. They've now expired, and the taxes come down slightly, right? The 5.4 is what goes to the state. The other taxes on there go to the development you're in. Now, over the years, it's got a lot easier for them to refund the money that you actually get based on what you bought. But prior to computers and stuff, you could actually buy something here and return it out there and get a much better refund. Driving around St. Louis to return things at a higher refund really, gas-wise, doesn't make sense. But they've gotten where that's not as easy to do anyways. But sales tax, if I go into Macy's and I buy a pair of jeans that it costs $100 and I pay $110, what is Macy's revenue?
You said what?
Okay, he was too busy drinking. I go into Macy's, my jeans cost $100. The tax was, I pay $110. With taxes, what is their revenue? $100. So what does the journal entry then look like, assuming I pay cash?
Revenue, sales.
Okay, so we say sales for how much?
400.
110.
Cash for $100.
So Macy's gets how much in cash?
$100.
110.
Oh, 110.
110, okay.
And then 50,
Sales for
400,
100.
and
Sales
then
tax.
sales tax payable.
10.
Sales tax payable. There we go.
Okay.
That tax is not theirs. They cannot include it in their sales. They could not put it anywhere but sales tax payable. When do they pay that tax? Usually the next question. Depends again on the size of the company. If you've ever gone to smaller companies or like craft fairs, for the vendors that do it appropriately and charge sales tax, I would be willing to tell you that they probably pay their sales tax quarterly because they don't get that much. But for a company like Macy's, they probably pay their sales tax at least monthly, if not weekly. Because what do you think their sales tax is? A lot, exactly. All right?
Do they incur the sales tax when they purchase the items, or they? I know, but say they're buying a lot of items, right?
Who do they pay their sales tax to?
The vendors.
So
They-
they're double paying sales.
No. We
Oh,
pay sales
purchasing.
tax to them.
Okay,
They
gotcha,
pay
gotcha,
tax
gotcha,
on the
gotcha.
right. So, yeah. So they collect sales tax when we buy. So they have to make sure that their sales is being recorded strictly off. And then obviously, if we return something, what happens to the sales tax? It decreases by a debit. Exactly. All right. The other revenue, unearned revenue, is also a current liability. We've talked about that all semester. Nothing has changed with unearned revenue or deferred revenue, as they call it in this wonderful book now. This is just an example. It's the same that we have. They're just using Best Buy. And this is your deferred revenue, which we've done since Chapter 3, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. And we talked about this at the start. This is just the current portion of long-term debt. So let's look at a problem. And go back to the slides. Gotta hit the button. All right. So the next part of this, we'll see. We'll not get through everything, but we'll at least get to talk about bonds. So bonds. Who can tell me what a bond is?
Investment.
It is an investment. That is correct.
Like a set interest rate on a loan.
It's a set interest rate on a loan. How is it different from a notes payable? Because a notes payable is a set interest rate, isn't it?
But you can sell the bond. You cannot sell.
You can sell a bond. You can't sell a note. Can you get out of a note? You can pay a note off early. Can you pay your car off early? Can you pay your house off early? Yeah. So you can pay a note off early, just like you can pay a bond off early. What's the difference between a bond and a note? Great question. Do you go into a bank and say, look, I would like to borrow $100,000. I will give you 6% interest for the next 10 years. How's that sound? Does the bank say okay?
No.
What's the bank going to say?
They have their own
You're on my
terms.
terms.
Yeah. The bank kind of says, okay, why don't you sit down? Let me run a credit check, right? I will lend you $100,000 at 8% interest for the next 10 years. The bank tells you. And then the bank will say, take it or leave it. Correct? And if you don't like it, you go somewhere else. So with bonds, bonds are different. We're not talking about the bonds that you can go to the bank and buy for $50 that turns into $100 after 10 years. Okay? Those are like the grandma bonds. We're not talking about those. These are bonds that there are a lot of people out there that have money. All right? Some people know it. Some are companies, some are conglomerates, some are just individuals. A lot of times they're called angel investors because they don't want you to know who they name. They're silent investors. So there's a market out there where you would go and say, hey, I would like to borrow $100,000 at 6% interest for the next 10 years. Who wants to lend me money? And you guys, Lucas would say, I will. And that would be a bond. I'm offering a bond at 6% interest for 10 years. Who wants it? And Lucas would say aye. So a bond is different in the sense that the bond holder sets the rate, sets the term, sets the face value. The face value is the amount of the bond. And whoever wants the bond invests in the bond. The reason people invest in bonds is bonds are safe. Right? If you go to a bank, you can get a fixed rate, which means it never changes. Usually, a fixed rate is higher if you're borrowing money than if you go with a variable rate. And I don't know what the standard rate is right now, but let's say a fixed rate is 5.5%. But if you go with a variable rate, it might be 3.8. What's the problem with a variable rate?
When the market falls.
When the market changes, the variable rate could go up. Whereas if you lock in at a fixed rate, your rate doesn't change. Huh?
So you're kind of playing a chance.
You're playing a chance game. Variable rates have been fine for the last, 5+ years. We locked in on a fixed rate on our house at like 3.2. Right? It's fantastic, right? We have people contacting us all the time saying, you know what you should do, because we have a home equity line, it's higher. You should roll them together. We can't roll them together because our house is at 3.2. Why would you take the big mortgage and go at a higher rate to take the little equity and get it at a lower rate? We can't do it. And once people call and they're like, well, let's do this, and you'd be like, our home's at 3.2. Never mind. And they hang up real quick. All you gotta do is tell them. Even our own bank sometimes will be like, why don't we do this? And they'll look and they're like, oh, never mind. So you get a low lock rate, you keep it. Bonds tend to have rates that are safe. They may or may not be lower than the market. So people, I hope you've heard this term before, but you want to diversify your investments, all right? That means you want to have investments in different type things. You want to have some in stock, all right? Which is why when you get your first real job, yes, you're going to have Social Security coming out of your paycheck, all right? Most of you, unless you end up teaching for a public school or you're a government employee. You're going to have Social Security coming out of your paycheck. But it's still good, really good, to put money in a 401k because not only is Social Security not enough to live on, but we don't know if it's going to be there, all right? So you want to have two things. And then do you want to buy a stock on the other side? Yeah. You want to have things going for your retirement, multiple things. So people that have money, lots of money, don't want to just have it in the stock market, or they don't want to just have it in this company, or they don't want to just have it in real estate. They're going to have some in bonds. Bonds are safe. Bonds are safe because bonds aren't the stock market doing this. All right, bonds tend to be safe. All right, so what do we know about bonds? There are 3 things you have to know about a bond. All right, bonds have a face value. Bonds have a maturity date. And bonds have what's called a stated interest rate. Every bond has that. All right? You have to know those 3 things. You cannot do anything with a bond if you don't know those. So the example I gave you, I said $100,000, 10 years, 6%. The stated rate does not equal the market rate. And you don't want to confuse that. These are the numbers that you do all calculations on. So in a multiple choice problem, don't let the market rate throw you off. These are the numbers. If a bond is issued at face value, it is said to be issued at 100%. So if I issue my bond at face value, I am issuing it at 100%. My bond would be cash and bonds payable. It doesn't matter what I do with the bond. My bond payable is always going to be the face value of the bond.
Bond payable
This
is the
is-
face value.
Bond payable is the face value.
Is
Right?
this just your bond?
This is
or
just my bond.
Okay.
Just my bond. So maturity date, face value, stated interest rate. They used to look like this, but you actually don't get a copy anymore. It's kind of like stock. You actually used to get stock. I actually somewhere have a stock certificate from ACC. You don't get them anymore. It's intangible almost. You can't touch it. So they used to look like that when you used to get them. And so the next thing that you need to know is, in order to figure out the interest, you take the face value times the stated interest rate. So my bond's interest is $6,000 a year. So over the life of this bond, how much interest am I going to pay?
For 10 years, 6,000, 60,000.
Yes. That's a really good interest rate. $60,000. Now in this example, it was only a $1,000 bond, so they're getting $60.
What is this? 100,000 times 6,000. It's bonds interest.
100,000 times the interest rate. That's how much interest they're going to get.
Interest.
Yep.
Why is it 12 of 12?
Why is the total what?
12 of 12.
For 1 year.
Okay.
So that's how much you're going to get every year. It's still your principal equals times rate times time.
But the amount to multiply by 12 is... Oh, never mind.
Okay. All right, so what happens is, if I am offering you 6% and the market rate is 6%, will you necessarily take my bond? All you guys have money. Will you necessarily invest in my bond, or will you maybe go with the market, because the market has the ability to go up, right? It also has the ability to go down, but you might go with the market, right? And maybe take the chance of it going up. So what happens in the bond world is there are 2 different ways a bond can be issued. A bond can be issued at a discount, and a bond can be issued at a premium. A bond is said to be issued at a discount when it's issued at less than 100%. So, let's say a bond is issued at 95%. If a bond is issued at 95%, then you would say 95% of the face value. 95% of the face value is 95,000. So that means I would say to you, as money people, you give me $95,000, I will pay you back 100
Plus interest.
plus interest. But I'm only going to pay you 4% interest. Well, let's keep it at 6. The market rate, let's say the market rate is at 8. The market's at 8. I'm going to pay you 95. You pay me 95,000. All right? You pay me 95,000. I'll give you 6% interest, but the market's at 8. So what does that mean? That means I pay you $100,000 back plus $60,000. So you get $160,000 back. You paid me 95. So that means you got $65,000. So at the beginning it sounded good, didn't it? You pay me 95, I pay you back 100. You net 65. But if the market rate's at 8 and you would have invested in the market, what interest would you have made? Yeah, 100,000 times 8. You would have made 80,000. So the question is, do you invest with me and make 65 safely, or do you invest in the market that's currently going at 8?
So if it drops,
If it drops,
then
you don't make 80,000.
Does it adjust every year or every?
The market adjusts every day. We've gone out and looked at the
How
stock
do you
market.
calculate interest then?
You have to go with what you think's going to happen.
so you're just gambling.
You're gambling, exactly. I don't like the market. All right. The other side of this, you could say, how about this? You pay me $105,000. I pay you back 100. But the market is currently at 4%, and I'll pay you 6.
Most definitely.
Now you're giving me 105 up front, and I'm only going to pay you back 100.
Oh, just kidding.
So the market, you're going to pay me 105%, which means you're going to give me 105,000, and I'm going to pay you back 100.
Plus interest.
So you're going to get 160,000, but at the start you were short 5,000, so your gain is 55,000. If you would have invested in the market, you would have gotten 40,000, because 4% times 100,000. So which, even though you're giving me more money up front, you actually would gain more by getting the higher interest rate. So what do these two examples tell you? You don't know, right? Here, it actually looks like it's better to invest and give me more money up front because you're guaranteed a higher interest rate. Could the market rebound and go up higher than what you're paying? Absolutely. So, could you end up losing money? Yeah, but you got a $15,000 cushion. Over here, it looks like the market's much better, but it could go the other way. That diversify that I talked about, that's kind of up to each investor. This slide right here is a really good slide to look at. It kind of shows you, that's why I use the 6%. What is the bondholder willing to think? Well, at 4%, you're probably willing to pay more than face value. At 8%, I don't know if I want to. Okay, that's what the bondholder's going through. Yeah.
So do you know anything about like the Parkway bond? What's up with that one?
Oh, for the school district?
Yeah, what's up with that?
I don't know about the Parkway bonds. School districts use bonds a lot. All right? and municipalities use bond, because they need a large amount of money.
I thought bonds were only gonna be for like public agencies.
No, bonds can be done for a whole bunch of different reasons. We just hear about them in schools because it's a large amount of money paid through by your taxes. And then a lot of times what will happen, like for schools, is they'll ask for like this big bond. They'll use half of it to pay off an old bond,
Oh,
and then they'll
just continue.
continue using that bond. It's a
So you-
continuing bond.
So you don't know if it was fixed rate or market?
I don't know,
They
no.
don't disclose that?
Well, no, they have to. It's a public school, but you just got to dig to find it.
Okay.
Yeah, but you could find out if you wanted to. So, all right, so remember, and this is very important, I am not here Thursday. Joan is teaching. That does not mean you should skip, because she is going to do this again, reinforce it, and do journal entries. Next week we're on to 11. So I'm being upfront and telling you have a sub,
We only have 1 day of class.
and you only have 1 day of class next week. We come back after Thanksgiving, you have 1 day and a test. We all know what you have to do on the next test based on your last test, right? So me being upfront about the sub does not mean it's a skip day because I'm not here. It means she teaches financial accounting. She knows what she's talking about. You need to act just like you would in class, ask your normal questions. You guys are going to do a lot of problems to make sure you understand it. This is on the test. You guys got to be able to do this, okay? So I expect everyone's going to be here. There'll probably be points in class, I'm just saying.
So our test is that Thursday after.
Thursday after Thanksgiving, yep. Yes,
A paper.
Paper.
One this time.
you get 8.5 by 11 front page paper.
Hey, our class
Double pay.